This is The Ugly Duckling, a visual essay by Ryan Queenan. Let's begin with a brief summary of the story, The Ugly Duckling by Hans Christian. The Ugly Duckling was written by Danish author Hans Christian Andersen in 1844. The tale begins with a mother duck waiting for her eggs to hatch. All of the eggs hatch but one, the largest egg. A pretty little duckling emerges from them all. But when the largest egg hatches, a duckling that looks different from the rest is born. He is uglier and bigger than the rest, and despite his unusual appearance, he could still swim like a duck. So the mother duck brought him with her to the farmyard. At the farmyard, he was called Ugly and was harassed endlessly by the people and the animals that lived there. The duckling left the farmyard to find a place where he would be accepted, but could not find anywhere to fit in. He was so convinced that he was ugly, because that was all he was ever called, that he never bothered to question if he wasn't. At the end of the story, wanting to die, the ugly duckling bent his head downward and caught a glimpse of his reflection in the water. And what he saw was no longer a dark gray bird, ugly and disagreeable to look at, but a graceful and beautiful swan. It's my intro/thesis. The story of The Ugly Duckling is a story of delusional self-hatred and ultimately self-discovery. The ugly duckling is treated like an outcast and is called ugly many times. These mean words were a constant in his life, so the duckling believed them. He did not know where he belonged, and frankly, he thought that he did not belong anywhere because of what he was told. Others continuously told him what he was and who he was. This endless negative chatter did not give him time to think, is this really me? It is important to listen to ourselves rather than what others say about us. This is something every grown-up should know, and it's something we can learn from the tale of the ugly duckling. On to supporting arguments. Even before the ugly duckling is born, he is already treated with contempt. His mother is impatient that he is not born, and growing impatient, she states, "I'm quite tired of it." An elderly female duck stated that the large egg was definitely a turkey's egg, and that the mother should just leave the egg where it was. Of course, the duckling was not born a turkey, but something else entirely, a swan/ugly duckling. The first words that he heard after his hatching were, "It is very large and not at all like the others. I wonder if it really is a turkey." And his mom said that. In contrast, when the duckling's siblings were born, their appearance was not mentioned at all. The only thing the mother told them was that the world is very large. In this world, the world of ducks and other animals, appearance and lineage were very important. When the ducklings were led to the farmyard, they were instructed to bow to a duck that was there because she is the highest born of them all and has Spanish blood. This duck has a red flag tied to her leg, which is very grand and a great honor for a duck. The importance of appearances and visual beauty are drilled into the duckling's mind immediately after birth. This makes the sting of harsh words even worse. When the ducklings arrived at the farmyard, the duck with Spanish blood exclaimed about the ugly duckling, "What a queer-looking object. One of them is. We don't want him here." And then she flew and bit the ugly duckling on the neck. The duckling's mother pleaded to leave him alone as he is harmless, but the Spanish duck said, "Yes, but he is so big and ugly, and therefore he must be turned out." Despite not doing anything, the ugly duckling's worth is immediately decided by his appearance. The ugly duckling learns early on that his actions do not matter. The only thing that matters is how he looks and how he presents himself. Of course, this is wildly untrue and is a horrible thing to think at such a young age. At the farmyard, the poor duckling was driven about by everyone. Even his brothers and sisters were unkind to him. They would say things like, "Ah, you ugly creature, I wish the cat would get you." And his own mother said that she wished he had never been born. Aside from the abuse he was getting from his family, the ducks pecked him, the chickens beat him, and the girl who fed the poultry kicked him. The other animals did not show any compassion, ostracizing the ugly duckling because of the way he looked. The ugly duckling came to the conclusion that they are afraid of me because I am ugly. This is the first time he has acknowledged his disposition, saying, "I am ugly." He believes what everyone is saying about him. Upon leaving the farmyard, he found his way to a moor inhabited by wild ducks. Upon meeting the ducks, the ugly duckling bowed his head respectfully, and the ducks responded by saying, "You are exceedingly ugly, but that will not matter if you do not want to marry one of our family." Again, despite not causing any harm or doing anything wrong, the duck is belittled because of his appearance. Marriage was the last thing on the duckling's mind. He just wanted permission to lie among the rushes and drink some water on the moor. Again, the ugly duckling does not have any time to think and reflect into an identity. He is focused on the negative things that are being said and how we can fit in and survive despite that. At this moor, the ugly duckling was approached by goslings, who told him that despite his ugliness, he has the potential to make a pretty goose wife at a nearby moor. They emphasized the importance of appearance again to the duckling by saying that marrying a pretty goose is something that he ought to do. Right after this conversation, the two goslings in front of him were shot by hunters, and sporting dogs bounded out from the rushes to retrieve the kills. The big dogs with their jaws terrified the ugly duckling, but the dogs ignored the duckling entirely. The duckling thought to himself, "Oh, how thankful I am for being so ugly. Even a dog will not bite me." This is a slightly more optimistic view, but he is still calling himself ugly. He is believing the perspectives of others more and more. After this close call with death, he left the moor as fast as he could until the bad weather no longer permitted his flight. He found refuge in a small cottage nearby that was occupied by an old woman, a tomcat, and a hen. The duckling did not find belonging here, but he learned some important lessons during his stay. The old woman that lived in the cottage loved her cat, who could raise his back, purr, and throw sparks from his fur if it was pet the right way, and she loved her hen, who laid good eggs. She was hard of seeing and thought that the ugly duckling was a big fat duck who could be a good source of eggs, so she allowed the duckling to live at the cottage for 3 weeks to see if he could produce valuable eggs. The cat and the hen told the duckling that since he cannot raise his back, purr, throw sparks, or lay eggs, that he has no right to express an opinion when sensible people are speaking. These harsh words made the duckling sulk in a corner, feeling very low-spirited. At the cottage, your appearance did not determine your value, but rather what you could do determined your value. For example, you were valuable if you could lay eggs. Of course, your skills and what you can do are not the only things that give you value. Everyone and everything has inherent value. But this made the duckling realize that appearances do not matter everywhere you go, and being ugly would not prevent him from finding a place to fit in after all. As the sun came out and lifted the duck's spirits, it brought him out of his corner and made him yearn for a swim. He told this idea to the hen and the cat, who thought it was absurd. The duckling said, "You don't understand me," and he came to the conclusion that he must go out into the world again. Here the duckling is beginning to realize that his own thoughts and desires are more important than the desires that others force upon him. The idea that we should never give up on following our passions and finding a place in society is a strong theme of the Ugly Duckling. The duckling soon found a pond where he could swim and dive under the water to his heart's content. He was free to chase his own desires and to be himself. One evening, while at this pond, just before the sunset, the duckling spotted a flock of beautiful birds over the bushes. These birds had dazzling white plumage and graceful curved necks. They were swans. He thought that he would never forget these beautiful birds, and he began to splash around with excitement. He did not know what type of birds these were, but he knew they were beautiful and that he felt a connection towards them. He was not envious of these beautiful creatures, but he wished to be as lovely as they. Despite his yearning to be like these new birds, he began to think about the past and how he would have been able to live happily with the ducks if only he had gotten a little encouragement. The duckling reflects on the past, but he still does not look at his own reflection. The duck stayed at this pond from spring through autumn and into winter. Slowly his swimming area shrank as the pond froze over and the duckling froze with it. He had no reason to leave because this was a safe space for him, and he still does not know if he belongs anywhere else. The duckling did not die in this pond, however, as a peasant man freed him from the ice using a wooden shoe. He was revived in the warmth of the peasant's home. The peasant's children wanted to play with the duckling, but he is scared because of how he's been treated in the past, and he flies away. Since many months had passed at this point, the children probably wanted to play with him because he had grown from an ugly duckling into a swan. But the duckling did not know that yet. In his mind and in his heart, he is still an ugly duckling that nobody wants to be around. His self-image has been mutated almost beyond repair, and he would have a hard time believing anything else. The duckling managed to survive a harsh winter on his own, and before he realized, he could feel the warm sun shining, hear the larks singing, and saw that all around him was beautiful spring. The ugly duckling felt that his wings were strong, so he flapped his wings and flew until he found himself in a large garden. From a nearby thicket, 3 beautiful swans emerged. The duckling remembered these beautiful birds and felt more strangely unhappy than ever. This is because the swans represent what the duckling wants to be and the anguish he feels because he knows, or at least he thinks, that he could never be like them. The duckling decides that he will fly over to the swans so that they can kill him, as he figures that it's better to be killed by them than to die being pecked at by ducks, beaten by hens, kicked by girls, or starve from hunger over the winter. The duckling approaches the swans, who rush to meet him with outstretched wings. The duckling says, "Kill me," while he bends his head toward the water and awaits his death. At this moment, when he is finally giving up on finding value within himself, he has given up on finding a place where he belongs, he looks at his own reflection. In the water, instead of seeing an ugly duckling that he thought he was, he saw who he truly was, a graceful and beautiful swan. The ugly duckling, now the beautiful swan, was overwhelmed with emotion and again began to reflect on his past. He was now glad that he had experienced so much sorrow and suffering, because now he could enjoy all of the pleasures and happiness around him so much more. He cried out from the depths of his heart, "I never dreamed of such happiness as this while I was an ugly duckling." He says that he was an ugly duckling because he now knows that is not what he is or what he has ever been. To conclude, The Tale of the Ugly Duckling by Hans Christian Andersen is an amazing story that can teach us many valuable lessons. Lessons such as words can hurt people, or try to put yourself in others' shoes, be compassionate, and most importantly, believe in yourself and stay true to yourself. The ugly duckling was subject to a lot of abuse and had to survive on his own for a long time before finally finding somewhere where he fits in and can be his true self. Because of the endless negative comments that came his way, the ugly duckling was unable to have a positive self-image. The ugly duckling needs to learn that most of the time we hanker for recognition from people we love and end up being miserable, forgetting our wonderful nature. At the end of the story, the ugly duckling learns to appreciate his hardships and figures out who he is. And when he looks at his reflection now, he no longer has to ask, "Is this really me?" These are my references and all the images I used.